Ross, and another installment of The Last Page. On this show, we like to highlight a lot of the positive things that are happening in our community from a social, political perspective, from an arts and cultural perspective. Love talking with people who have placed themselves in leadership potential position. I'm getting old. Love dealing with people who have placed themselves in positions who kind of step up to the plate and allow their potential to speak for them. And today we're on with Charles Elijah Walker Hoover. He is the president of the UMass Amherst chapter of the NAACP. Am I correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. So why don't you take a minute and just introduce yourself, bro?
Yeah, my name is Charles Elijah Walker Hoover. I'm a senior at UMass Amherst. I serve as the president of UMass NAACP chapter, Afro American Studies major in the second oldest Afro American Studies department in the country. And just I'm very interested in how do we intersect education, justice, and opportunity. And I'm very, very much community oriented. Grew up in the church, and so like I am because we are. That I live by the Ubuntu philosophy. And yeah, that's pretty much a gist of who I am.
Okay. So getting involved and being involved is nothing new for you from what we briefly discussed prior to starting the show. Why don't you talk a little bit about your background? Because sometimes people assume that folks just kind of show up out of thin air. But the reality is, you're part of an extended legacy of folks who have created change in the community, correct?
Yes, sir. Yeah, my
Let's talk
mother
about
was very involved in the community. Sardina Walker, she was very much an activist, community organizer. Passed anti-bullying legislation or helped pass it once my older brother passed away. And at a national and a federal state level, she passed anti-bullying legislation. I was just seeing her. Like that was the first person that I saw that was in the community organizing. But there were some others. Like we had Mrs. Sophia Jeffrey. She was a
that.
community activist and organizer. Mrs. Edith Ray. She was like president of the Springfield NAACP for a long time,
Yeah.
and she was a very close friend of my family. And so there was just all around us, community organizers and activists. I mean, Ben Swan was always around, other folks like that. So
Okay.
it's just been, the environment was activism, and organizing.
So as a young man, the conversations around the house were probably not the same as everybody else across the country. You were talking issues, talking change,
That's right.
public safety, things of that nature.
Yeah, one of my first like moments as a kid that I remember was when President Obama became was elected. When he was elected president, like that was like it was a big thing in the House. Everybody was excited. It was like wow, like there's a first black president. That was one of the like first memories that I remember as a kid.
Okay. Now, I had said something slick. I'm like, people don't really want to hear from the old folks like me. They really want to hear from young people. You want to talk about your response? 'Cause I thought it was interesting, and I also thought it was necessary and definitely relevant. You want to expound upon what you talked about earlier?
Yeah, no, my response to that was like, our coalition has to be intergenerational. I mean, we need folks who've been around, who've been doing the work, who know the history, and we need folks who are new to this and who can connect with young folks and get people to show up and be active. I mean, Springfield, we have one of the lowest voter turnouts in the state, and so like it's going to take intergenerational people, folks from your generation, folks from my generation, folks from all everywhere and in between, to come together and really change our community for the better.
Okay. So when it comes down to leadership and involvement, you don't have to take a leadership role, but for folks who want to be active and actively involved, there really are no box. It's kind of like you get in where you fit in, correct?
Yeah, correct. I mean, at the NAACP, we stress that, this is volunteer work. We're all volunteers, as much time as you can give. If you want to give, 80 hours, you can give 80 hours. If you can only give 8, that's cool. Wherever you can and whenever you can and however that looks like, is that knocking on doors? Is that, handing out flyers? Is that maybe being on social media, sending links out and stuff like that? So like, wherever you can, it's always important to, get involved. And there's no like stress test or there's no like, qualifications or you have to do this. It's really just however much you can give.
I like that. I like that. Let me ask you, but I'm gonna jump on the young black leadership role just for a minute. Um, how do you see the role of young leadership extending beyond university walls and into the broader community? I know there are things you are doing in the larger community, but let's talk. There are a lot of folks in my bracket. who've been doing it for a long time and trying to figure out, okay, what do we need to do to get people involved? How do we get the young folks on? The reality is, I believe they're already involved in doing things in their own way, in their own capacity. But how do we work collectively to get more people involved? Because a lot of older folks are tired,
Yeah.
you know. So how do we do that? I mean, have you given that any thought in terms of how we get younger folks out?
Yeah, I mean, with younger folks, we have to meet them where they're at. I mean, a lot of them are on, social media, and so they're seeing stuff. Like TikTok is one of the main ways that like a lot of these kids are seeing information. And so I'm not saying we have to make a TikTok, but maybe we have to, connect with the people who are leading TikTok, the influencers, so to speak, and getting them to, start talking about the issues and talking about ways to get involved. And then not assuming that they don't know stuff, because I know there's a lot of people that go out around and like they assume, oh, young folks, they just don't care or they don't know. No, they do know, but they don't know how to get involved. And so we'd have to,
Mhm.
do a mass education and mobilization campaign, to get really get folks involved and really help them understand where to start. And then from there, we might be able to build something.
Okay. So who are some of the who are some of your, outside of your mom, and I knew your mom well. Again, my condolences. Who are some of the folks around campus and the community that you've kind of, aligned yourself with to get work done or to strengthen or enhance what you're doing or enhance what they're doing? Are there any older folks, professors, community leaders that you've worked with directly since
Yeah.
because it seems like you came out running.
No, no, I've definitely crossed and linked arms with some older folks. Definitely the Springfield chapter of the NAACP has been a great start. Bishop Talbert
Okay.
Swan and those folks. Dr.
Absolutely.
Shabazz has definitely been somebody, a mentor of mine. He's a professor here at UMass, but he does a lot of work in the wider Western Mass community,
Absolutely.
Greenfield, all the way to Springfield, and even Pittsfield. And then, I mean, there's been cats like Jesse Liederman. He's
Yep.
the
I know Jesse.
regional director for Ed Markey. That's someone who's I've been in contact with and who's been like very encouraging to get people involved. And he's been a mentor of mine, I would say. So folks like that, they've been really helpful and definitely been supporters. And then I would say just like family members and people that I know well that I would say aren't family members, but like church family. So like Celestial Praise is a church that I grew up in. So like folks in the church have
Okay.
been really helpful as well.
Right. And I asked that question because sometimes we ask the question, what do we need to be doing? And the reality is a lot of it's being done already. We just don't acknowledge it. I love the fact that you acknowledge it. I love you. I love where you're going. I just happen to run across a couple of posts and people talking about you online. So I'm like, well, who is this guy? I think I reached out one time. I was just like, okay, he's getting it, and I appreciate that. Let me ask you this, from young man's perspective, what do you think are some of the biggest challenges, or some not biggest? How do you rate that? What are some of the challenges you think we need to overcome and work towards? If you had to put together a list of priorities in terms of challenging issues, what would that list look like?
Challenging issues in terms of like Springfield.
Springfield, just in general, things that we need to work towards, or people say we often operate without a plan. We do wake up and we put out fires on a regular basis. But if someone hired you as the CEO for, say, the Black community, what would your list of priorities look like?
It's definitely education.
Okay.
Because a lot of folks they just don't really know like how connected we are. We get so wrapped up in like I'm Jamaican or I'm Haitian or I'm African American and or I'm from the continent. I'm Ghanaian or we just get so wrapped up in our ethnicities that we don't realize that like we're all at the same point of time. Like we're all Africans at the end of the day, and so like we all have like this relatability of experiencing this racialized America, and so that prohibits us from like coming together because all we see is our differences. And I know there's people like online like FBAs or whatever and just different
Hmm.
groups that like to like start up like these quote unquote diaspora wars and when at the end of the day that's stuff that like is really holds us back from like building solidarity and building being a unit. Um, because the black community is not like the black community of the 1960s. It's not just descendants of enslaved um, Africans in America. It's people who migrated here, and you know, so we look different from the 1960s, but that doesn't mean that like we're not still all black, you know. And so that's really the big thing is education.
Okay. Education, cultural awareness, national identity without division. I hear you on that. What would be the next one?
The next one I would say is it's two things. It's like part of it is being loyal to, you know, the Democrat Party, and part of it is not having like a full like plan when it comes to voting. Like we don't vote as a block, you know, we vote as like individuals. And so like whereas other communities they'll be like voting as like a block, like we need this done to get our vote. And so they'll support the candidate that'll help them, you know, get the community center or help them get funds into their community. We don't do that. We just vote for, you know, whoever is like a progressive candidate or, you know, whoever seems to like black people. But at the end of the day, it's not about likability. It's about what are you going to do for our community? Like, are you going to fix the community center up? I know that the MLK thing is they have a gas leak or something. Like, are you gonna
Yeah.
help us get a new community center? And if so, we'll all vote for you. Like, that's what we need to do is like thinking of our vote as like we have our vote. What can you do for us? And we're all gonna vote the same. Like that's what we need more of.
Okay. So looking at in terms of education, after education, it's kind of like mobilizing people to understand that if we move as a single unit, we learn to coordinate, organize our votes, and direct them in a way that's going to be impactful to our communities. And that's how we should move.
That's right.
Okay. No argument here. And I love pushing back, but I'm like, there's nothing to push back on. I love it.
All right.
So first step is education. Next is really mobilizing our vote politically to make sure that we're focusing on process and not personality. What's the
All
third
right.
one?
Third one I would say is real simple, and this is Springfield focused
Okay.
infrastructure. Like a lot of our stuff is outdated. Um, you know, and it doesn't have to be that way, but like, you know, we're operating with like some of the same stuff that's been been in use for 50, 40, 50 years. And lack of housing is also combined with the infrastructure thing is like there's a lot of people that are homeless or unhoused. I think unhoused is like the proper term, and it doesn't have to be that way. There's a lot of land, there's a lot of, you know, stuff out there, but the problem is we have this thing, these people, these few people that own pretty much a lot of land, and they're just sitting on the land. They're not like doing any development. They're not doing any. They're just because the land is valuable, and so like their
Mhm.
idea is like we're gonna hold this land until like we can actually make a profit, and that's unrealistic because like, you know, people need houses, people need new infrastructure, people need like something that can boost their esteem. And I think there's a lot of low esteem in Springfield because like the infrastructure is outdated and lack of housing, and so it's like people
Now,
just
now, when you say infrastructure, I know we have a lot of inequity when it comes down to housing, and we have a number of challenges. But when you talk about infrastructure, can you expound on that just a little bit? You know,
yeah, I mean, look at the. I mean, I've written about it. Look at the highway. Like the highway is proven to be like the viaduct specifically is proven to be like one of the like worst transportation built like one of the worst transportation ideas ever because it's one of those things where it's crumbling infrastructure, but it affects everything in the city because it cuts right through the city, and so it brings down like the level um of livability in the city, and it cuts off the waterfront. You know, there's a
hmm
beautiful waterfront, Connecticut River,
absolutely,
but
absolutely.
you got the highway running through and tractor trailers and cars, and it's like 24/7. And so like pretty much there is no waterfront, there is no walkability or livability because of, you know, the highway. And that's what I mean when I mean infrastructure. I'm not just talking about buildings, I'm
No,
talking
I
about
understand.
the way that like things are designed from like an urban planning perspective. um, and that's what is one of our problems, and specifically in Springfield.
Okay, good stuff. So we have education, mobilization, infrastructure. Give me one more. I'm
And
not
then
going
the
to.
final thing I would say is there's just like a level of disinterest. Just people aren't interested in politics, I would say, or just in like just their like being in tune with what's going on. Like there's a lot of stuff going on in the world. Like there's the war in Iran, is a whole bunch of crazy stuff. But I just feel like people aren't interested. Because it's to the point where like they feel like there's nothing they can do. They feel powerless.
Right.
And so that's another one is like people feel powerless and that leads to disinterest in their reality, their social reality.
How would we change that? Because I mean, apathy has been around for a long time. Powerlessness, people being unengaged, disconnected. It's been around for a minute, and it's historically we've operated under a traditional model or approach to really creating social change. I probably the last 10, 15, maybe 20 years, everything is about creating programs. Um, how can I say this? We create programs for young people to, violence prevention programs. We have all types of programs to redirect behaviors. But I'm not sure if we've really dealt with talking and engaging people about their vision for themselves, their families, their communities. How do we go about changing that? Because it's interesting when there's a hot issue. When we were dealing with Tracy Whitfield a few weeks ago, and her challenges with the Springfield City Council, and I looked at the large number of people who were engaging and getting involved in the conversations on one level or the other. Others who were organizing to ensure that, you know, she made it through that little trial, that trial period. But how do we keep people engaged? If it was up to you, what would I mean? If you were able to sit down with the leadership on all levels, white, black, Latino, Asian, the Asian community, we have a fairly large Asian community that goes completely unengaged. When I was working with the mayor, I met with Dr. Chu, who's from UMass, and the
Mm.
group that he was working with the various Asian groups. They're also neglected, unengaged. They're on the side. They don't get involved. If you became mayor of the city of Springfield, what would you do to try and change that dynamic?
A lot of it is means meeting people where they're at. Like
Okay.
people think like, oh, the mayor or the city council, they're up here or they're up there, and like they don't see them like walking through their neighborhoods. And sure, you could say you drive through the neighborhood and drive around, but like, are you walking through the neighborhood? Are you knocking on people's doors? Like a lot of that stuff doesn't happen anymore. One of it's because of technology and phones and that sort of thing. But like that would be like a good thing. Is like literally going back to like that, like knocking on people's doors. And I'm sure that's people will say that's not safe. Well, that's why you get like a security or whatever, or you have somebody, a person with you. But yeah, knocking on people's doors, really checking in with people, showing up. Like, where are the people showing up? There's a lot of events where that happen in Springfield that go under the radar, like where it's just like people hanging out, or places that people will go to hang out. But are you going there? Are you going to those places and seeing what the community is up to? Maybe, maybe not, and I'm not sure. So like that would be something. Is like showing up at the places that you're not expecting. I'm not talking like MLK Day or pancake breakfast. I'm
Right.
saying like a Saturday where it's like, oh, they're doing they're giving out food pantry or something like that, or they're engaging with the community, or that's maybe it's an AAU basketball game or tournament. Showing up there at those places, that's
Right.
where you get people, and that's where the people are at.
Yeah. Neighborhood parks. Walk through neighborhoods. When they respect you, you're always safe. I've always believed that. Let's talk about accountability in action. There's a number of areas I just really want to kind of pick your brain to kind of see what you thought about that. If you talk about accountability in action, what does accountability look like for elected officials, institutions, or even our own community organizations? What would accountability look like for you?
I think accountability is more of uh, not just talking about what you do or what you're doing, but like having a visible, like tangible, like sheet, with a spreadsheet or something. Like I did this. Like it's like job tracking, like tracking what you're doing. Like because really you're a public official, so like people should know what you're up to, and
Hmm.
maybe even having like some type of like public forums. Like I remember like that was like a thing like way back where people would just have like public forums and like people would show up with their questions and concerns. But you wouldn't have it at like city hall. You would have it at like the local library in like the neighborhood, like Mason Square branch, or like
Rebecca Johnson,
right, Rebecca
MLK
Johnson
Jim.
Elementary
Yeah,
School. Like that would be something where it's like, okay, like this is someone who's here in front of my face. It's not someone that's like behind a desk somewhere in downtown. Like you're actually showing up and you want to hear from me, and like you want to hear the problems. Like there's a whole bunch of problems. Like, you talk to folks like my aunt or my uncle, they'll be like, oh, the street lights, the trash, or the litter. But I'm not sure our, elected officials know those are a problem, or maybe they do. But, folks like, that I talk to, they feel like they don't know it's a problem.
Okay. All right. So, how would you recommend we move beyond symbolic gestures and move towards measurable outcomes? As he talked about, if you're an elected official, even if you're not an elected official, if you're a community leader and you volunteered to step into that limelight and you're showing folks we're going to change this, at that point there's a level of accountability. How do we move beyond the symbolic gestures? I'm D Moss. I'm saying we're going to change the voting trends. How do we hold people accountable? How do we move beyond the symbolic gestures, the rhetoric, and move towards measurable outcomes? Like, what would
Voting.
you? And I'm not assuming you have all the answers, but so far your answers are spot on. So,
Voting, as simple as that. Voting, raising our level of turnout for voting, that keeps people accountable. I mean, knowing when people are up for reelection, because that's when that's their report card.
right,
Reelections. I'm running for reelection. Okay, what did you do during your time in office, and how did it impact me or my community? And if you don't have an answer for that, then maybe I should, support the candidate that's running against you who has these ideas, or who at least has a plan or a blueprint for something. And then if that doesn't work, well, in the next 2 years, whenever that person is up for reelection, we'll vote again. We'll vote for someone else, or like, so like really using our voting power, and understanding the power of our vote
right.
is really how we hold these folks accountable.
Okay. And I think I'm going to go back to something you said earlier in terms of organizing and mobilizing our vote. Springfield has one of the strongest black voting blocks in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. No one
Mm.
gets in without the black vote. We have a strong voting block. Even our turnout is pretty damn good. The vast majority of communities, different ethnic and racial communities in the Springfield area, have become very apathetic when it comes down to voting. But we do vote. And typically, what happens with the black vote, we look at Ward 4 or Ward 3 and say nobody votes. And people don't realize that the vast majority of black voters, no disrespect to any other communities, but our votes, we're not really in Mason Square. Our numbers, we're, if you look at our numbers, we're really in the Pine Point, 16 acres neighborhoods and spread throughout the city. So if people would take a look at the numbers citywide instead of just by those two wards, they'll see that we do vote. And I think it goes back to what you're saying. I think we have to do a better job of really organizing those votes, mobilizing them in a direction that will be mutually beneficial across the board for us. But
Right.
I agree with everything you're saying, and I'm loving. I love what I'm hearing. I know I'm not in Springfield on a regular basis, but I love what I'm hearing because it tells me that there's just so much promise in Springfield. And I'm glad people were talking about you. And I'm glad I got a chance to just reach out and be like, hey, I know you don't know me, but I really got to have a conversation.
Yeah.
Okay, I think it's needed and necessary. Sometimes we overlook people simply because we don't know them or they're not in our circles.
Right.
So it's crazy. What keeps you hopeful about the future of our community?
Well, I think we're on the precipice. Springfield is one of those places when you're entering Massachusetts, your introduction is Springfield. Like if you're coming
Correct.
from, Connecticut, New York, and you're coming up I-91, your introduction to Massachusetts is Springfield. And we have a lot of hope. We do have like crumbling infrastructure, but like there's gonna be a new courthouse. There's gonna
Mhm.
be potentially, this food court I keep hearing about, or food hall or whatever. And there's people who are in Springfield who care. People who are still deciding to raise their children in Springfield. Like I have, two little cousins. They're 1 or 2 in 4 months or 5 months. So like people are choosing to live in Springfield
Right.
still, despite everything. And
Yeah.
I think right there, that's hope, because like people are deciding, okay, yeah, we'll live here. I mean, we have our problems, but we'll live here. So
Right.
it's
And
hope.
people aren't giving up on it. Okay. What message would you give to young people who want to lead but may not see themselves in that role as of yet?
I mean, get involved. I mean, with a campaign, like that's what I did. I got involved with Kareem Kaboya's campaign for Ward 4 City Council.
Yes, my guy,
Um,
Cambodia. Yes.
and that was something where I didn't even realize you could get involved with a campaign. Like I was nervous. I was like, should I get involved? I called him up. I was like, I'm interested in your campaign. He was like, yeah, sure, come on. And some of these people who are running for office, they're just like you. I mean, in a way, I mean, they may, have the name recognition or may not, but they want to help their community. And so if you're from the community and you want to join and help them, I would encourage you to get involved. Just as simple as that. Or even, I mean, become a delegate. I'm a delegate now. I didn't even think I would be that. But that's as simple as just going to like a party convention, a city convention, and seeing the candidates. And that's where the candidates are at. These conventions. So that's where it starts.
Right. Um, what message would you give to the folks who have been out here fighting, for change in various degrees, let's say the last 20, 30 years? What would you say to them to inspire them, the Talbert Swans, the Denise Jordans, the Tracy Whitfields, the Bud Williams of the world? What would you say to them to keep them inspired and keep them motivated?
I would say thank you. I mean, thank you for your service. Thank you for pouring into a community. I mean, you could have done anything else. You could have lived anywhere else, but thank you for really like trying to make a difference. The area you grew up, most of them grew up there, and so really thank you for your work. And people like me, we see you. We see the work that you're doing, and we're proud to say that you represent us, especially the city council president Tracy Whitfield. First Black woman president of city council. That's something that's really huge. Denise Jordan. I mean, we all know about her father, Ray Jordan, one of the
Mhm.
greatest people who've served the city of Springfield. Bud Williams, of course, the work that he's done, Bishop Talbert Swan, the work that the NAACP does. And I would even add one more, Dr. Denal, the Springfield's Black student superintendent of
Yeah,
schools. You know,
absolutely.
these are the people who really care, because they grew up here and they've poured back in into Springfield. So thank you for pouring back in.
All right. And I want to say thank you um, in inspiration. I love the motivating, energy you bring into what you do. You have folks riled up, eyebrows raised, like, wow, who's this? And I'm one of them. So I just want to thank you for being you. Again, knew your mom, and I think she would be forever proud. And wherever she's at, I'm sure she's proud of what you're doing. I hope you
Thank you.
keep it up, and I hope you're keeping those grades up there up at UMass.
Yes, sir.
All right. With that being said, I said I was gonna keep it down to 30 minutes. We had 28 minutes. I told you I was gonna keep my word. So
That's
this
right.
would not be the last time I reach out, man. I just want to say I really, really appreciate what you're doing.
Yes, sir.
Um, Damn proud of you. And just whatever you do, just keep it up. If you ever need me for anything, whatever it is, just you have my contact information. Don't ever hesitate and don't think you're ever walking alone.
Yes,
Cool.
sir. I appreciate that. We'll
All
talk.
right. All right, everybody. There goes one of our great leaders. Thank you so much, man. All right, brother.
Take care.